This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
Hello and welcome to the Unstoppable Indians. Every week we take a journey into the life of an outstanding Indian, a person whose talent, acumen or moral example is transforming India. The best, the finest from every field join me, Manvi Dhillon, on this show to share their life story, their journey to success, some of the knocks along the way, what made them get up and keep going, what makes them an unstoppable Indian. My guest today has been making films for over 35 years. The themes he chooses are from everyday life, but they strike a powerful chord. The script, the direction, the cinematic talent is mesmerizing. I'm very pleased to introduce Shyam Benegal. Thank you very much for joining me on the Unstoppable Indians. 35 years making films. I'm sure each film you give your heart and soul to it. What is the secret reservoir of inspiration?
Well, you know, each film is actually a kind of adventure. That's one of the things. What makes you keep going is because it's always a process of discovery. It's a journey, you know. It's a journey into an experience, a one or another kind of experience. And all those experiences are exciting. And filmmaking, therefore, is this exciting journey and a process of discovery. So once you've finished shooting a film, there's also an incredible sense of loss until you start another film.
I'm sure.
And that process keeps going on. I mean, it's quite endless, really, because I don't believe I've come to a point where I say enough is enough, you know. Because you really are dealing with life. That's what it is. And because you're dealing with life, it can, I mean,
there is so much in life that one could cover.
There's nothing, there's no end to that.
But the moment you say it's a Shyam Benegal film, one thinks of a socially meaningful film. Is that something that you've consciously decided upon early on in your career? In a sense, is it a motto by which you live, that it must be meaningful?
Not really. Not at all, as a matter of fact. You see, the idea that it has to do with your own interests. If you have interests and you have concerns, all human beings do. When you have a certain kind of interest, and my interest largely is social, you know, in the society around me. It has to do with society close to me, the larger society, even the largest possible society. But essentially, the interest and concern is societal. And because of that, many things come into it. You know, people come into it, human beings come into it, all the problems, political things come into it, you know, economics comes into it, anthropology comes into it. You know, there's nothing that won't come into it. Because if you keep your eyes and ears open to what's going on around you, obviously there are many things there that concern you. There is something that don't concern you, but a large number of things actually concern you. In the case of most human beings, they do concern you. You can shut them off. That's a different matter. But I prefer not to shut them off.
But the tone is serious. Does that make you a serious person?
I would not at all. I mean, the problems may be serious, but you know, there's so many different ways of looking at it. I don't believe that I look at these things in a way that is either pessimistic or in any way dark, you know, because I don't think I'm that kind of a person. I cannot say things to an audience that says there's no hope. Who am I to say that? You know, when you say so-and-so is pessimistic, well, you can be pessimistic about yourself, but how can you say you're pessimistic about life?
And to society at large.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's totally absurd, you know. So that's one of the things. I mean, of course, you're serious, but I've made comedies. My present film, which
Is of course Welcome to Sajjanpur is a
Yes.
comedy.
Yeah.
Is it tough to get into a comedy mode or not really?
Not at all, except that it's difficult to make comedy. It's difficult to make comedy that makes people laugh, but it's not just a question of making people laugh, but it also, at the end of it, it must also leave something behind, some little thought, something. So, because the best comedies are of those kinds. The best comedy ever, if you look at, I mean, the Chaplin was probably the finest comic actor and probably made the best comedies the world has ever known. Look at all his films. You will find that you're laughing, but there's also something that moves you there, something that points to the human condition. And that's very important, because without that, what does it mean? Without that, you're just laughing at other people.
Right. The protagonist in this case is the letter writer, and I'm sitting across to you, a person who probably wrote a letter 15 years ago, because it's all about email and SMSs and mobiles. It's set in rural India. Again, did you say, well, you know what, I'm going to make a point here. I'm going to set this comedy in rural India. I'm going to have the protagonist a letter writer. Was there a point you're making, or it just all naturally fell into place?
Well, it naturally fell into place, but of course I must say that I am concerned about a few things of life in urban India today. There's a tendency, particularly in high metropolitan India and class 1 cities and so on and so forth, to imagine that there is no world beyond them. They can't see that more than 50% of us, are living in village India. And why must it simply fall off the map? If you look at Indian films, say 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you will find that there's always a mix.
And today it's so urban-centric.
It's all gone, as though the village experience is simply of no consequence.
I want to go back a bit to the beginning, actually. You were born in Hyderabad?
Yes.
What were those early years like?
Well, I just loved it there that time. Hyderabad in those days happened to be very feudal, of course. But it was a wonderful place in the sense that, you see, one of the things that I count myself as among the lucky ones, where one experienced in many ways medieval India, and modern India, all at the same time. Because Hyderabad was an old feudal state. Nothing really had changed. It was almost like you had moved back into the 16th or 17th century.
Absolutely.
On one level. And on the other, instantly there was a sense of the modern. Because where I grew up actually in a cantonment town. A little cantonment town in the heart of Hyderabad. So you had different kinds of experiences. And of course it was also colonial at that time. So, but of course it all changed in a few years, but whatever that was, but to start off with, this to me was a very important experience. And that experience, and because one started to see change in a way that today you only see everything in terms of technological change. If you're sitting in urban India, you are seeing everything through the filter of technological change. But it was different because, things are changing. I mean, society is changing.
And what a journey you have seen.
It's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, it's extraordinary.
But I'm curious to know, when did that interest or that desire to explore a future in film, when did the seed for that get sown?
Well, that was largely because I think I discovered the cinema, and fortunately I discovered the cinema because my father, who was a still photographer, happened to be an kind of home movies freak. He had a little 16mm movie camera and he made movies, meaning he shot films which he put together, his children. He had quite a number of them, so the films every year or two about his numerous children, which was part of our entertainment as children. And also it was kind of after dinner entertainment, so it was that was one part of it. And the other thing was that we had a cinema very close to our home, which happened to be the Garrison Cinema. Garrison cinemas in those days, the army cantonments, they used to have their own cinemas for the troops. And this used to have 3 changes a week. There would be a North Indian film, there would be a South Indian film, and there would also be a foreign film. So you had 3 changes a week in a given week.
And you saw all of them?
I would see all of them, obviously. So that really got me hooked. And there's a reason why I got hooked, because you see, cinema seemed to be the only thing that truly transported you into another world. And that is a world that there's a promise that you can create this world. You can create the world of that cinema. So you can create your own world. And when you're children, you're constantly doing that. So creating your own little worlds. And that grew into a kind of passion as I was starting to grow up. And clearly, this was what I wanted to do. Create world upon world through different films.